Hello and welcome to the fifth lecture in AC 1002. This lecture covers regulation and the legal structures that are required before and during the design process and in the lead up to development. So primarily this is a lecture where we're going to look at who gets to say we can develop, who says that something is approved or not approved. And some of the concepts in here you will have heard of. They should be quite obvious, or you'll have seen them in television programs or the like. Some other ones are maybe not going to be familiar, but they're all part of a system that allows buildings to go ahead after some assessments been made. So if we look first of all at who has a say in the design process, there are a number of parties interested in this or who have input into it. The first is the client primarily. So the client is the person who asks for a building to be designed. He commissions the design and sets a budget and the scope of work, and to a certain extent the brief, and the design team. So that's architect, M&E engineer, structural engineer, and anyone else involved in the design. They work together to realise the client's brief, to realise the client's design. This lecture is going to look at the last three on this list, so it's the planning authority, building control, and any other interested parties. So if we look first of all at planning permission, most people would have heard of planning permission, but it sometimes can be confusing to understand exactly what it is they are concerned with or what they have control over. So most building projects in the UK go through a process of applying for and potentially or hopefully gaining planning permission. And planning permission can be thought of as a formal granting of permission to build by the local authority after they've considered a number of key factors. So first and foremost, they're going to look at what the building is used for. If you put an application in for a house, or a nightclub, or a pig farm, those types of buildings and those uses of buildings will be considered differently depending on where they are. And planning are really looking for buildings to be fitted into certain categories to make sure that they don't become nuisance neighbours, that they're appropriate for the area to be developed in. And the planners have a number of tools at their disposal to be able to check this. Buildings are classified by their use category, and buildings can be accepted or rejected based on whether that use category fits in with the land that the proposed development is going to be taking place on. Secondly, they'll be looking at the size and shape of a building. They want to know how big it is, and so that they can check it against the context. They want to know that it's not going to dwarf a site or overdevelop a site, or indeed underdevelop a site. They want to look at the shape of it, especially in some parts of cities where they would be looking to make sure that the form of the building or the form of the proposed design fits in or respects the surroundings. They'll be interested in what the building is made of, again specifically in areas where they would like to be able to control the look of a particular area. So they might choose or request that materials are of a particular quality, that there are no materials which jar or stand out or conflict with the existing materials. They don't necessarily make you build in granite if every building around about it is in granite, but more likely they would be looking for you to choose materials that are of the same quality as the surrounding materials, so that there's not an obvious drop in quality of the building that you're designing. They'll be looking at what impact the building will have on its surroundings. So this can be visual impact, where they might consider the look of the building in relation to the buildings around about it, but they might also be looking at items such as overlooking. So if you're developing a building in one particular place and the windows overlook into private ground, the planners may be concerned that that would be a breach of privacy or would reduce the amenity of neighbours. So the process of applying for planning usually requires you to have developed up a design to a point where we can understand what it's going to be made of, how large it is, and its position within a site. So we would prepare a number of drawings, design statements, reports, and any other supporting documents that would be required so that the planners could get a good idea of what the building is. And these would be submitted electronically to the planning portal. So in Scotland we have eplanning.scot, and it's an extract from the cover page here. In other parts of the UK they would use their own systems, but the system would be pretty much similar. The local authority can then receive a planning application and they would consider it against their policies. They would look at it in terms of the design and the quality of the proposal, and they would also issue issue an invitation to neighbours and other interested parties surrounding the site to come and view and potentially comment on the proposals. And at the start of any planning application, there's usually a 3-week period where neighbours for a planning application can fill out comments, what they call representations, to put their views forward. Usually these come up as objections, but they can be letters of support, very rarely. And it's important to remember that planning is a legal process. So this application that you put to the council, if it is rejected and you continue to build, that can cause problems, and in worst case scenarios they may ask you to remove the building. So it is a legal process, and you should not build without planning permission. There are exceptions which we'll come on to. One of the exceptions is permitted development rights. And we can see here a fairly ordinary looking street. This is actually Esselman Avenue in Aberdeen, which was once called Britain's Satellite Street. And this is a kind of unfortunate peppering of satellite dishes on a visible street due to the orientation of the satellite, and the dishes needed to go on the front. So it's quite unfortunate this happens on this street, but permitted development is what has allowed this, and it's the mechanism by which small changes or additions can be made to most buildings without the owner requiring planning permission. So this is a system where the planners can grant overarching permission to do small changes without having to gain permission. And it's really to stop the planners having to receive or deal with very, very small changes to buildings which aren't maybe seen as architecturally significant or historically significant. So things like adding satellite dishes, changing windows, and small extensions to the rear properties or changes to the roof, repairs can usually be done to buildings that are not listed or in conservation areas without requiring planning permission. This is referred to as permitted development. One of the uh, additional characteristics that some buildings have is that they are listed, and you probably would have heard of listed buildings. And these tend to be um, significant buildings which are judged to have special architectural or historic interest. Special in inverted commas. It is, I suppose, debatable what is meant by special, but really they're looking for something which is of outstanding quality, or has uniqueness in some way, or has a historical interest. So that could be an attachment to a particular person, or an event, or a particular period in time. And listed buildings are preserved to help explain our culture and enrich our environment. They become part of our past, and they talk about a particular period of time, or events that happened. Buildings are listed on a register maintained by Historic Environment Scotland, and you can view that register by going to their website. And buildings that are listed will be categorized into one of three subcategories, so A, B, or C. And these are effectively ways of listing buildings, but in reducing measures or reducing recognition of their importance. So, category A is a building which is nationally or internationally important. B is the step down, so that might be regional importance. And C is local importance. So, nationally, I think the building behind this, the slide here, is Marshall College. After it was cleaned, um, which is debatable whether it should be cleaned, but it has been cleaned. But we can see it gleaming away there, and it is an A listed building, which means that it's been judged to be of national importance. It's of a quality, and it has special architectural interest that is deemed it to be nationally important. Regional may be buildings that are important to the northeast of Scotland, if we're concentrating around Aberdeen, or local may be buildings that within Aberdeen are particularly good examples of a building typology. Different from listed buildings, but in a similar vein, are conservation areas. Whereas listed buildings concern themselves with one individual building, conservation areas are areas of special architectural or historic interest. So we're really looking at collections of buildings or streets, or parts of towns and villages which it's considered are of special architectural interest. So the image behind here is the High Street in Old Aberdeen, near the university, and it is one of many conservation areas in Aberdeen. There are over 600 conservation areas throughout Scotland. I think there are 8 in Aberdeen, and you can view the maps of conservation areas by usually going to that particular council and searching for maps. I'm not sure if there is a centralised database, but the councils definitely maintain these. And conservation areas are crucial for the conservation of our environment. They allow an additional level of control so that changes can't easily be made to buildings, or can't be made under permitted development rights to buildings. And the council may want to control things like changing windows, changing fixtures and fittings to the front of buildings. So we can see on this image here, there are cast iron rainwater goods, so that's gutters and downpipes. And the conservation officer, if a planning application went in to change these buildings, would probably want windows, doors, and rainwater goods to be retained in their original state, or replaced with identical copies. So it's a way of maintaining an extra level of control over buildings. So if we look at what the difference is between them, listed buildings is particular to individual buildings, and they're looking at the quality of materials, uniqueness of design, but it can be something like a significant person was born in a particular building. And you've probably all seen blue plaques on the side of buildings, and sometimes those buildings are listed because of that. Um, a good example in Scotland would be the buildings that are associated with the poet Robert Burns. In themselves, they're not particularly architecturally interesting, but due to the historical significance of their occupant, the buildings get protected as a way of recognising that. Conservation areas are whole areas, so the urban arrangement of buildings, the composition of streets, or the completeness of an area is what is being protected. And in each of these cases, if a planning application is submitted for work to a building, either a listed building or a building within a conservation area, the planning officer would deal with it as a case, but would pass control over certain elements to a separate entity within the council called a conservation officer, and they would deal with the aspects that were particular to the listing or the conservation area. So the planning system is really concerned with what a building is, what it looks like, what its function is, and how it would fit into its environment. It's not really a technical appraisal. In the UK and in Scotland, we consider technical appraisals separately from appearance and function. So our technical system is building standards, sometimes referred to as building control or building warrant. Technically, the document that you get when you apply for and get granted permission to build is called the building warrant. And most councils would have a building control department that would deal with that. So you would prepare a set of drawings, probably more technically in depth than planning drawings, but similar. And this should cover a number of different aspects that the building standards officer would consider. So he would be looking at the structure of the building. So is it safe? Is it protected from fire? The design of the spaces within the building. So have the designers considered accessibility, safety in stairs, access from one level within the building to another. They'd be looking for descriptions of the materials. So that might be materials used within the construction of a wall to make sure that they are safe and they've been certified by an appropriate body. He'd probably be looking for the energy use, so some sort of calculation to prove that the energy of a building or the energy use of a building or the heat loss through the fabric of the building was up to the standards expressed in the technical standards. And there's a whole lot more things that they would look at, and the document for that is the technical standards, and it has guidance on most aspects of buildings. So if we looked at an example of a plan that might be submitted to or for building warrant approval, we would probably start to split the information up into different levels. So rather than just having a plan that shows us the arrangement of rooms and doors and windows, we would probably have a plan that might show an electrical layout. So we would show where smoke and heat detectors are located, where downlights, where switches are located, and this would form part of the information that then they could deal with. And each different type of plan would have its own notes associated with it. For the general arrangement drawings, the ones that show us the location of things, we would note on things that maybe wouldn't be on planning drawings. So we would have widths marked on certain areas. We would talk about the materials. We would add things like manoeuvring spaces for wheelchairs if they were included in a kitchen. and we would specify the rise and run of stairs, so that each amount of information on each drawing was relevant to its purpose. And other drawings that you might provide for this would be a drainage layout, a flooring material layout if possible. We might also look at electrical layouts, as in the previous slide, possibly data, overhead structure, below ground drainage, all sorts of things. So depending on the complexity of the building, the number of drawings has to increase to be able to reflect that complexity. And the building warrant drawings would attempt to give a complete picture of the build-up of a building, and all of the various systems, constructional or services or structural, that are within that. The process of building warrant or applying for a building warrant is similar to planning. The building control is the department within the council, and they consider the design of buildings against a set document called the technical standards, which is a kind of reflection of the legal parameters, which are the building regulations. So the technical standards give practical guidance on how to implement the building regulations. The technical standards are divided into two separate books. Say books because they're usually PDFs. There's a separate set of standards for domestic construction than there is for non-domestic construction. So domestic construction concerns itself usually with single houses, or extensions, or blocks of flats. Non-domestic would consider schools, heliports, hospitals, any other type of building you can possibly think on. And the standards are slightly different for things like fire protection, or warning systems for fire, or escape, because of the different types of activities within the buildings. And the building control officer would consider the design of your drawings, look at all the contents of them, and probably make comments, which would be technical comments asking for either clarification on some things, or more information, or perhaps pointing out where some things could be done better. And the designer would usually answer these comments and issue revised plans, and that can happen a few times, and it can be a conversation between the building control officer and the designer and the client, which rotates a few times until the plans are finalised. When the plans are finalised and the design satisfies the technical standards, the warrant officer would then issue the warrant, and the project can start. So there are other forms of protection beyond planning and building warrant, and some projects, depending on where they are, or some sites, depending on where they are, may have other forms of protection, or may need other forms of certification, or may need to be considered against other forms of certification. And there are certifying bodies who issue certificates approving materials or components to make sure that they're fit for purpose. There's also individual standards for some applications. So things like buildings from the Ministry of Defence would have their own standards, which would probably be more stringent than the building standards. There are separate standards for roundabout railways and airports. So you have to not only consider what the base technical standards are, but you also have to figure out if there's other information that you need to satisfy, or other standards that you need to satisfy. For protection of sites, there are some areas of land or water, or both, which represent our natural heritage, and these are sometimes protected as triple SIs, so sites of special scientific interest. Recently, I say recently, probably within the past 10 years, we had a situation in Scotland where a protected triple SI, which was a unique area of land, which was sand dunes just north of Bulmedy, were built upon to form a golf club. And this sort of flies in the face of the protection that they were given, but the person building the golf club was influential and rich. There's also areas of protection that go beyond our national bodies, so beyond something that can be issued by Scottish authorities or UK authorities, and probably the most widespread one is UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So these are considered internationally important. Within Scotland, I think that there are a few. The old town of Edinburgh, I think, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. New Lanark, which is one of the kind of early places in the Industrial Revolution, is a big mill complex, worth visiting if you're ever to look at it, or in the area. That's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And I think that there's one in Orkney that protects the prehistoric sites in Orkney. So these are bits of land or buildings or areas within cities or villages that are important for the history of the world. And there can be other minor bodies or smaller bodies that can influence the design at an early stage. And sometimes these are consulted by the planners during the planning process. And sometimes they might hold sway over the planners in some other way. There's heritage bodies, wildlife conservationists, and airport authorities. Many years ago, I worked for a company in Glasgow, and they were doing landscape work next to Edinburgh Airport, and we got a letter back from a particular team in the airport called the Bird Strike Avoidance Team, and they objected to us creating a pond near the airport because the pond may attract birds, which might in turn fly into aircraft. So the planners had consulted with them because it was within the area of the airport. So there are other aspects of design or other bodies which can influence aspects of design beyond the statutory authorities. But we'll be covering more on this in the second module of this series, which is AC 1005, which is in the second semester of first year. So in conclusion, the process of designing a building is quite complex, and to be able to get a building started and completed, you need to satisfy a number of different bodies. So the client is the first and foremost person that you're dealing with. They commission the design. The design team act on the client's instructions. So there's a number of different voices within the design team which have input. The local authority considers the design for planning. So that is what it looks like, where it is, and what it functions as. We would then get technical input provided by third parties, so that could be certification bodies, material suppliers, other design team members or specialists, and the local authority would then consider the technical design for the issuing of a building warrant. And in Scotland, you need to have planning in place and building warrant in place before you can build, and it is not legal to do so. In England, things are slightly different, but that's probably for you to find out. Okay, thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions about this lecture or any observations, or if you think I stuttered too much in the middle, just let me know in the workshops. Okay, thanks. Bye.